I didn't know she did that. That was a little freaky. All right. So we've gone over pretty much everything review. We went over the basic general anatomy of the heart. We had our cranial chambers, which were and then you say the atrium. Now, what is the most visible part of the atrium? It also starts with the letter A. The auricle. The auricle. What are the two caudal chambers? The ventricles. What is the vein that brings blood from the body back to the heart? The vena cava. What valve is between the right atrium and right ventricle? The tricuspid. From the right ventricle, blood passes through what valve? The pulmonary semilunar, and travels via what blood vessel to the lungs? The pulmonary artery. And what is odd about this specific artery? It's one of the only ones that carries deoxygenated. We actually have another one in our urinary system in the kidney. The whole thing. So our deoxygenated blood, and the way I remember, it doesn't matter, arteries will always flow away from the heart. So just look at the direction of the blood. If it is flowing away, it has to be an artery, regardless of what it's carrying. So we go and pick up our shipment of oxygen, we drop off our shipment of carbon dioxide. We now return to the left side of the heart by what blood vessel? The pulmonary vein. Into the left atrium, and between the left atrium and left ventricle, we have what valve? The mitral valve, otherwise known as the bicuspid. From the left ventricle, we go out this valve. The aortic semilunar, and then this blood vessel carries blood away from the heart to the body. The aorta. Now the aorta becomes a smaller blood vessel called an artery, which becomes an even smaller blood vessel called arteriole, which then transitions to the very delicate blood vessel where active gas exchange happens. Our capillaries. Capillaries are the only blood vessel that will transition oxygenated to deoxygenated in the same vessel. From our capillaries, we go slightly larger to the venules, to our vein, and finally the mama jamba, the vena cava. Very nice. That's the blood flow through the heart. Hooked on phonics worked for you. All right, so now we start talking a little bit about do what?
My brain's tired.
Gotcha. So when we start talking about heart and how it pumps, we have pressure behind the movement of blood. Duh. It's called your blood pressure. When your left ventricle contracts, it splooshes the contents of blood out the aorta, and that causes the pressure on the inside of that blood vessel to increase. When the ventricle relaxes, the pressure decreases. So when you feel your pulse, your blood vessel is doing this, and when you feel your pulse and you feel the blood vessel push against your finger, that's when the ventricle has contracted, sending the blood out When it comes away from your finger, the ventricle has relaxed. Does that make sense to everybody? The words for these are systole and diastole. That's how you say these words. Now, systole is when our atrioventricular valves close and the semilunar valves open. The semilunar valves have to open when the ventricles contract, and the mitral and tricuspid have to close because when the ventricles contract, we don't want the blood going back the opposite way, do we? I always think about each of the chambers as a bathtub. And when you want to empty the bathtub, what do you have to do? You got to pull the plug. So if you think of the valve like the bathtub plug, when your ventricle bath, it needs to be emptied. You pull the plug, which is the semilunar valves. When the atria bathtub needs to be empty, you pull the plugs, which would be the tricuspid and bicuspid valves. So systole is where our pulmonary semilunar and our aortic semilunar open and blood splooshes out. Systole is the high pressure, when your blood vessel presses against your finger. Diastole is when your ventricles relax. This would be the lower pressure, when there is no blood. Really? I don't know who that was.
On top of this is the heart, not digestion.
I don't know who that was, but apparently there are people not muted and they are belching loudly into their microphone.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit more in a bit about this systole and diastole. But when you go and have your blood pressure read and they put the cuff on you and they say, oh my gosh, your blood pressure is 140/70. Well, the 140 is the highest amount of pressure and the 70 is the lowest amount of pressure. Now, when we're looking at these two pressures, highest and lowest, now obviously both are important, but which one are we going to pay specific attention to? You got a 50-50 shot of guessing and getting it right. Why do you say diastole?
I was doing now, yes, but it seems to be like tape.
So here's why, because you're right, it is diastole is the number we're going to pay the first attention to. Is diastole the highest or the lowest pressure we're going to see? The lowest. If I look at that number that is supposed to be the lowest pressure, and it's jacked up sky high, what does that then tell me about the highest pressure? It's going to blow something out. So what I want to look at first is how high is the lowest pressure? And then how does that compare to the highest pressure? And normal for a dog, well, on average, because you know we also have species and breed sizes, but on average 140/70. The same for a human. Approximately 140/70 is normal.
So systole is pulmonary semilunar and aortic semilunar flows, and then
Yeah, absolutely. So systole is ventricular contraction. Diastole is ventricular relaxation. Now, have you guys done your stethoscope, your thoracic auscultation?
Yes.
Fabulous. So when you are listening to the heart, you know you hear lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. It should be a sharp, crisp ending sound. Lub dub, lub dub, lub dub. what you're hearing there is the closing of the valves. So if you think this is my valve, these are my heart valves, and every time they close, makes a sound. That's the lub-dub. When our valves close, because we got two sets of valves, lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. And that's what you're hearing. Now, if you hear something called a heart murmur, we're going to talk about that in a little bit here as well. A heart murmur simply says the flow of blood is off. Something is happening, and then we got to figure out what. Maybe the valves are not closing properly, which is one of the most common things to happen. Instead of closing tight and preventing blood from backflowing, the valve might be weak, and it's allowing some of that blood to go back the opposite way. And I think on Friday, I drew the picture of the river. Remember how you have sometimes that one little bit of water that goes the opposite way and it creates a little tide pool? That's what's happening in the heart. So when you say this animal has a heart murmur, it doesn't tell you anything other than there's a blood pathway that is incorrect. Then we got to figure out what valve is associated with it and to what degree. And that's why you can have a first degree heart murmur, second degree heart murmur, all the way up to a fourth degree heart murmur. And instead of hearing, especially in like our fourth degree, when you listen and you hear a heart murmur, what you hear instead of lub-dub, 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 you hear something that sounds like because it's that tide pool. Did somebody call me?
That was my phone going off.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
So the cardiac cycle, what causes the heart to pump? Again, this is not shocking a revelation for anybody. The heart has its own electrical conduction that is not dependent on your nervous system. Your muscles are dependent on your nervous system. If you go brain dead, can your muscles work? Nope, cannot. Can your heart work? Yep. And that's where you can have brain dead people with no brain function have still an active beating heartbeat. And then you keep them alive until you can harvest the heart. The electrical impulse of the heart is initiated at the sinoatrial valve, SA node. And this bundle of nerve not only creates but also transmits the impulse. So it'll send that impulse from the pacemaker across the muscle fibers, causing them to contract. That's all.
So is this one the pacemaker?
This is the sinoatrial node is the pacemaker because it sets the pace of the heart. It will create, it'll charge up and then discharge, charge up and discharge, charge up and discharge. And the quicker it charges up and discharges, the faster your heart beats. The slower it charges up and discharges, the slower your heartbeat. It also will control how strong is your heart contracting. Sometimes your heart is, you're not even aware of it. But have you ever had those moments for whatever reason, could be for no reason, where your heart just starts beating out of your chest and it's just like thud, thud, thud. Well, that's because the electrical conduction, the impulse is much, much stronger. The stronger the impulse, the stronger the contraction. Similar to that TENS unit that I've been using now for a week. You turn up the electricity, what happens to the muscle contraction? It gets stronger.
This is what controls the fight or flight, right?
Now that's the autonomic nervous system,
Okay.
which does not directly not directly. Does it impact the heart? You betcha. What it does though is it causes you to produce a stress hormone called adrenaline, epinephrine. Epinephrine then works on the heart, causing it to increase the speed and the strength of the beating. Basically, what your autonomic nervous system is doing is saying, oh, holy crap balls. We're in big trouble. We need to fight our way out of this or we got to run away. And so what it does is it increases your respirations. It increases your heartbeat. It is now delivering excess oxygen in preparation for your cells to have this burst of energy, fight it off or run away.
So like remembering like a bad memory, so like if a dog like has a bad experience clipping their nails and then you go to clip it again, that's exactly what they're experiencing.
That's exactly, think just no different than human anxiety. If you had something in your past, so like I have several things that cause me, I have a lot of anxiety. I do, I have terrible anxiety. So for example, oh God, now I'm gonna give myself a panic attack just thinking about this. 2 years ago, I'll give you an example, because it's not dangerous. We were putting our camper away. Unfortunately, haven't been able to use the RV since back 2019. We couldn't go all last year. But we store it in the storage unit. But the storage unit only has about 8 inches on either side when you get it in. So backing it in is a stressful thing unto itself. The last time we did it, my significant other got a little cocky, and it was our last weekend for the year, and he's like, okay, we're gonna do this, and he rushed it, and he ended up getting the camper completely jacked to where we couldn't get it out and we couldn't get it in, and we ended up, when we were pulling it out, did some damage to the one side of the camper where the awning is. I get heart palpitations now when I think about having to bring him out and put him back in there. Like serious heart palpitation. I don't even know. It's one of those things I don't even want to go do it because I know I'll have to put it away. But that's my autonomic nervous system. Did it affect my heart? Yes, but indirectly. The thing that affects your heart directly is the need for the oxygen. With your autonomic nervous system, what has happened is your body has now said, okay, we're preparing for this terrible thing, so we need more oxygen, which causes your heart to beat faster, which it stimulates your pacemaker. But it's in the autonomic nervous system is an indirect. Does that make sense?
Sorry for
That's okay. So here we have a picture of the electrical conduction of the heart. Again, this is not a shocking revelation. We have our sinoatrial node, creates the electricity, diffuses it across the atria and to the atrioventricular node. From the atrioventricular node, so when it diffuses across the atria have now contracted. The atrioventricular node is just a collection spot where we can collect that impulse and then send it down the bundle of His. The bundle of His job is to unequally distribute the electricity because I need more to go to the left side than the right side. And then my Purkinje fibers deliver it to the muscle, causing it to contract. So I'm going to add a couple of new words. Polarize, depolarize, repolarize. So when you depolarize something, the way that I think of it is almost like a lightning bolt. The cloud is charging, and then sends out the lightning bolt. It has depolarized. It has built up, and then discharges. We say that is depolarizing. Now the time it takes from me sending the lightning bolt to recharging the cloud, recharging is repolarizing. So when I discharge the lightning, I have depolarized. When I'm recharging the cloud, I am repolarizing. When I send the lightning bolt out, that causes the muscle to contract, which by definition is systole. When the cloud is recharging and there is no lightning bolt stimulating, my muscle is in relaxation. Now, what questions can I answer for you? Does the cloud lightning thing help? Did that? And if you think about it, this is exactly how anything electrical works. Batteries in your, if you have a battery in your remote control, what do we have? What do we have? We have a pen. I have a battery, and I have a battery. I have a positive and a negative. And what's happening is these positive and negatives are just in a circle. Discharge, recharge, discharge, recharge, discharge, recharge. And that's what makes the remote control work. So again, depolarize, the cloud is discharging the lightning, causing the muscle to contract, systole. Yes.
So depolarization would be,
So to depolarize, depolarization is to discharge the lightning. Right.
because I was thinking polarization sounds more like the systole because the blood comes out.
Depolarizing, the cloud has charged, sends the lightning bolt, causing the muscle to contract. Repolarizing, the cloud, here's my lightning bolt inside the cloud, is recharging, but no lightning bolt is being sent out. I have to have the electricity to make the muscle contract. So here I've got the electricity going to the muscle, causing it to contract. Here the electricity is inside the cloud because we're having to reform and rebuild it. And so this is where the muscle is relaxed. So all we're doing here is describing what is happening electrically. Are we discharging an impulse? Are we recharging an impulse? That's it. That's all we're talking about here.
So this would be considered, sorry to the, well, that's the second I'll retry it. So it's considered the working thing. Correct?
Yes, so the depolarization would be the working phase because it's causing the muscle to contract and work.
I just wanted to make sure I had.
Yeah, and then the repolarization would be, I believe they refer to it as the resting phase because the muscle is relaxed and not actively working. I have to have the energy of the impulse to cause the muscle to contract. We'll be talking about these terms in even more depth. Right now, we're just using them as terminology. But we'll be talking about them in even more depth when we get into the nervous system. And we talk about depolarizing and repolarizing the nerve. Give you guys a minute more. What other questions can I answer for you? All we're interested in right now is basic terminology. Depolarize, we have released the impulse, causing an action in the muscle. Systole, contraction. Depolarize, we are regenerating, winding up a new impulse, but there's nothing happening in the muscle. Repolarize, muscle is at relax. Diastole. That's it. That's all. That's the depth we're going to right now. Does anyone have any further questions before we move on? I want to make sure everyone's on the bus because that is going to be really important. Again, yes, here for the terminology, but even more so when we get into the nervous system. And I know you guys immediately curl into the fetal position when I say these words, but it'll be fine. The sodium-potassium pump. Don't shake your head at me. This is going to be, I promise you, I'm going to do a pinky swear to you. This will be one of the easiest lectures you've ever heard on the sodium-potassium pump. Promise. You're going to hear the way I describe, and I'm not doing one of these. I have very rarely had a student go, I'm lost. It's great. We have a whole fairy tale. We do. And it makes it just mentally, you can go this little movie in your mind. I promise. It'll be okay. I got you. I got you. So our current is generated at the SA node. It then travels on one of two pathways, depending on what we need. We have the speedy route that goes through the fibers directly to the AV node, and the scenic route through the fibers all along the atria. If you remember from the picture that I just showed you, how we have a very small distance from the SA to the AV, that's the speedy route. We have an impulse that goes directly from SA to AV, because that's the AV's job, is to collect some of that energy. And then we have also some of the energy from the pacemaker diffusing across all the atrial mitral fibers, causing them to actively contract. So this impulse spreads like a ripple, like when you drop a rock into the pond and you get ripple after ripple after ripple. So we really have impulse passing from cell to cell.
That would be with the disc, intercalated disc.
And the nice, boom, the intercalated discs are what tell the cells and help them to communicate and pass that electrical conduction to one another. Sean?
How does it depend where you're
No different than a TENS unit. Have you ever used a TENS? So you know you put the electrical pad on, you set your electrical conduction, it causes the muscle to contract.
So
These two paddles, I position them so when you are in fibrillation, your pacemaker is just firing out random lightning bolts, causing random contractions. That's not good, because now you got a heart that's doing this. I'm going to take that conduction, this outside electricity, and I'm going to zap the sinoatrial node. So instead of it looking like a plasma ball, do you know what a plasma ball is? Instead of it looking like a plasma ball with all these tendrils of electricity, now it's back to one single lightning bolt.
I'll get back on track.
It just resets that sinoatrial node and causes it now to fire normally.
On TV. But in some of these parts of it, like that, doesn't follow.
I didn't hear the first part. What?
So sorry, like medical drama, TV.
Oh,
And the
TV,
heart stops,
yes.
that's not the couple. Correct.
Well, there's 1,073 things that causes your heart to stop. Could it be part of the electrical conduction? Absolutely, but is the sinoatrial node the only part of our electrical conduction? No. So we can have an electrical issue or a mechanical issue. It's just like your car. You got electrical, you got mechanical. Mechanical would be something is wrong with the muscle itself. Electrical is there something wrong with the wiring. But now we got to determine where in the wiring is there a problem.
So that's where the speedy route and scenic route come into
Where the what?
play. The speedy route and the scenic route come into play, correct?
This is where, so this is, let me, oh. Speedy route. I have my sinoatrial node. This is where the conduction is originating. My atrioventricular node, which collects the electricity to send it down to the ventricles. Speedy route is where it goes bzzz. Scenic route is where it meanders across and causes the atria to actively contract. I've got to have an impulse that goes across the atria to have them contract, and I have an impulse that goes directly to this other node to collect it for the ventricles. That's what we're talking about. Speedy route, I have a lightning bolt that is getting collected right here. Scenic route, we're just like taking, well, I say taking our time in comparison, yes. And causing the atria to contract.
That thought was the ventricles that caused the contraction.
No, the ventricles contract after the atria. The ventricles don't contract until the impulse comes down into the Purkinje fibers. So what we have is electricity. I'm sorry, let me get a different color. Electricity, I have my quick route, scenic route. From here, it then sends the conduction down the bundle of His and then redistributes it, where more is going to this side than this side. And then it comes out the Purkinje fibers, and that's what causes the ventricles to contract. While this is happening, this is recharging, this is relaxed. While this is happening, this is recharging, and this is relaxed. No, you're fine. Takes us right into this next slide. From the sinoatrial or SA node, we now move to the AV node, which is just a collection. It's just a set of cells that collects the lightning because we have to put it on a new path. From the AV node, it now travels down the bundle of His that unequally distributes it out the Purkinje fibers, which cause the ventricles to actively contract. And then it starts all over again. While the ventricles are contracting, the atria is relaxing because the sinoatrial node is now recharging. Sinoatrial node is recharging, which would mean is it depolarizing or repolarizing? Repolarizing. The ventricles are contracting. Are they depolarizing or repolarizing? Nice. So when my sinoatrial node cloud has another bolt of lightning, this lightning, have you ever seen that bolt of lightning as it goes across the sky and fades away? That's exactly, imagine that happening in your heart every time. Once this lightning bolt is recharged, my ventricles will relax because there's no more lightning, it's diffused, it's gone, and we discharge another bolt of lightning. It goes across the atria, causing them to contract to the AV node down the bundle of His Purkinje fibers. Lightning's all used up here. Lightning is being used down here. Recharging, 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 and pew! Recharging, recharging, and pew! Charging, charging, pew! And that's how your heart is working. Does that make sense to everybody? How about you guys on Zoom? You guys, I don't have my chat going. You guys stop me if you have questions. And then we did the dance. I can't do the dance. I'm very badly crippled right now. You remember the dance. Purkinje fibers. There's just another picture. I know you guys are the little visual learners. Sinoatrial node, speedy to the AV. Collecting, 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 collecting. Scenic, contracting, contracting, contracting. Now, once that lightning bolt has gone across, we now send it from here down the bundle of His Purkinje fibers. As this is contracting, this is relaxing. As this is contracting, this is relaxing. And it really is, if you think of your hands as a heart, this is what really visually helps me. Atria, ventricles. This is how your heart beats. All right, so you probably, if you've ever seen any kind of medical show ever, you've seen something that looks like this. This is, in human medicine, they call it an EKG. In animal medicine, we very often refer to it as an ECG. And it stands for electrocardiogram. Cardio in Latin can also be spelled with a K, hence the word EKG. So when our sinoatrial node is discharging its electricity, it's collecting at the AV node, it's getting sent down the bundle of His, out the Purkinje fibers. We can measure all of that. Electricity is measurable. So what we get is something that looks like this. It's very dramatic. Usually it then starts to slow down until eventually, what do you hear? And then there's no electrical conduction and the heart has stopped. This represents one heartbeat. So what I'm going to do is I am going to draw one of these out and we are going to interpret it together. Now, have anybody done anything in ECG? I don't know how much. You did nothing in MedTerm? Fabulous. I love it. That is one heartbeat. We call these P, Q, R, S, and T. Why? I have no idea. Because the guy decided these were the letters we're going to use. I'm sure there's a reason, I just don't know why. So, each of these letters represents something happening in the heart. And these lines, this very familiar, indicates either discharging or recharging the electrical parts of the heart. So if this is 1 heartbeat. The thing I want to do is outline exactly what, okay, ignoring this for a minute. Let's remember what has to happen in the heart during 1 heartbeat. The first thing, our atria contract. The second thing, so let me put a number here. And we're not even getting into the nitty gritty. What is happening? First, the atria contract, correct? Second, atria relax, ventricles contract. So far, so good? What is the third and final thing that has to happen? Ventricles relax. 1 heartbeat. Everybody with me? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, to represent what is happening in the heart. P wave. This represents the amount of electricity that is causing the atria to contract. What is happening? It's raining again?
The amount of activity that allows the atria.
So number 1, this P wave is the electricity causing the atria to contract. My Q, R, and S, we always talk about them together. They're going to represent number 2. But do you see how number 2 actually had 2 things happening at once? What 2 things are happening during the phase of number 2?
The atria is relaxing and the ventricles.
The atrias are relaxing and the ventricles are contracting. Now, why do I have such, we see, oh, this represents the amount of electricity. Why do I have such a huge, bigger spike right here than here? Because my ventricles need a much higher spike of electricity because they're contracting much, 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 much stronger. So this QRS represents the strength of the ventricles contracting and the strength or the energy for the atria to relax. Now, it's really hard. The atria relaxing is kind of masked and hidden because the strength of the ventricles is just overpowering. And then what's the third and final thing that happens in your heartbeat? The ventricles relax. And so this little T wave represents the energy that I see, the electricity that I see, causing the ventricles to relax. 1 heartbeat.
Is there a reason why it's those letters?
As I said, I have no idea. I'm sure there's a reason. I don't know what it is. So what we have is our P wave representing atrial contraction. QRS complex representing atrial relaxation and ventricular contraction. T wave, ventricular relaxation. We have a small pause and it all starts over again, hopefully. Hopefully. Because if it don't, you're in trouble. Does that make sense to everybody so far? So here is our here is P, Q, R, S, T. One heartbeat. And then we have a short pause while our sinoatrial node is recharging. And it discharges again. P, Q, R, S, T. It recharges. P, Q, R, S, T. Over and over the exact same way. And what we look for is how uniform are the spikes? How long is the time in between the heartbeats? How long is the time in between contraction and relaxation? Those are the things that we're looking at for ECG interpretation. Next semester, when you guys get into like canine feline clinical management, disease management, one of the things, and in special topics, you're going to learn is interpretation. You're going to learn about AV blocks. If something blocks the electricity from reaching the AV node, what cannot happen? But specifically, what part of the heart? The ventricles will not contract. And that's called an AV block. If you have the discharge getting blocked for some reason to the AV valve, not AV valve, the AV node, then there's nothing to send to cause the ventricles to contract. Well, where does blood go from your ventricles? To your lungs, to your body. So do you see how that's a bit of a problem? Yeah, that's a big problem. And so that would be mapping one area of electrical impulse problems. And then once we identify it, we can figure out what we need to do about it. And that is ECG in a nutshell. You guys are now all ECG experts. So this is just for you little visual learners. Everything I just wrote down, I know you're like, but I didn't get my picture of the whiteboard. It's okay. Look, what I have for you here, picture. And here we're using our words, depolarize meaning to contract, repolarize meaning to relax. You see how there's a problem there? And we're not going to go into a whole lot of complex ECG interpretation, but it's kind of fun to use some of this new knowledge. So here we have, oops. Here we have one heartbeat, one heartbeat, one heartbeat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and draw this. I'm going to go from the normal heartbeat. All right, so we've got one normal heartbeat and one normal heartbeat. Let's look at this little cheeky monkey in the middle. So we know now what I like to do is I like to mentally label every heartbeat. We know P, Q, R, S, T. Yes? Look at jacked up McGee over here. First off, let's label him. Can somebody please point out the P wave?
There's none.
There's no P wave. So P wave, nope. Can- but what we have also, we don't have any Q wave. We do have an R, very large. We have, it's hard to say, I'm willing to bet this is the S, and then what else am I missing? I don't got no T, I got no Q. So this is known as a premature ventricular contraction. And again, I'm not trying to confuse you. It's kind of interesting sometimes. Put some of this medical knowledge that you are gathering to use. It is premature because the ventricle contracted before it got sent word to do so. Called PVC. So this is where the ventricle just has almost a spasm. It's just, I don't know if you guys, in my mind, and I don't know why, I think about things differently than other people. Do you all know the character Stuart? Look what I can do.
Yes. From SNL.
From Mad TV. It's just like, look what I can do. That's what the ventricles are doing. The ventricles should be waiting for orders. The atria give the orders, the ventricles contract. And basically what the ventricles are doing are like, look what I can do. And the atria are like, I didn't tell you to do anything. Stop. Okay. Mentally, are you getting the scenario here? Okay. That's a premature ventricular contraction. Does it tell us why it's happening? No. Now that we know it is happening, we can figure out why.
While that's happening, are the atria also doing their things, or is that just the ventricle? And you can't
That
see
one
that?
heartbeat, the atria did nothing. The atria did not contract.
So right now the ventricles are empty.
Yep, and the atria are over full,
Okay.
which is going to usually cause a success of, especially in very advanced. Like for example, my dad was throwing PVCs one after another. Because what would happen is no atria contraction, ventricular, but it's not doing a nice strong, it's like, what I can do. And the atria are filling, look what I can do. And suddenly the atria go sploosh, sploosh, sploosh. And the ventricles are like, oh my God. And it causes fibrillation. But you'll get these PVCs one after another in very advanced cases. My dad was having that, and it turned out his aortic semilunar valve was not working properly. And so it was a mechanical problem that was manifesting as an electrical problem. So, but he had the valve replaced. He's doing very well.
What is a heart attack?
Depends on why. Again, all of the cardiac conditions, heart murmur, heart attack, fibrillation, AFib, VFib, all it's telling you is what is happening in the heart, not what is causing it. Heart attack means the heart is not working. Why? Well, again, could be an electrical issue, could be a mechanical issue, something with the heart muscle itself or the valves. If it's electrical, it can be happening in anywhere in the conduction. If it's mechanical, it could be happening anywhere. So heart attack just says, heart decided to go bonkers, back crack crazy. Now we got to figure out why. Why is it doing that? And how do we fix it? Here's just a few more. Again, I'm not going to be testing you over these. It's just kind of fun to use our medical knowledge and kind of feel smart and prideful of ourselves. All right, here we have normal heartbeat, normal heartbeat, normal heartbeat. Here we have first degree. Now, why is this a first degree? Well, and it's very, very, very subtle. What we are in fact looking at is it's very subtle. I want you to look specifically at this P wave. The distance between the P wave and the Q wave. So the distance here between the P wave and the Q wave. So I'm talking about, see where the little hand is right here? What has happened here? Do you see how that line has gotten longer? And so the length of line is the length of time. So what has happened is in this, my atrial contract, but it's taking longer for the impulse to cause my ventricles to contract. Now we got all kinds of jacked up problems. Heartbeat. What is this little turtle guy right here? It's a P wave, but what is there nothing of? The rest of the heartbeat. So we have a really long time between the end of this heartbeat and the beginning of this heartbeat. And the electricity never went to the AV valve, which means we don't have all of this part happening right here. Does that make sense to everybody? And then here, of course, holy smokes. This guy is just poor guy. Look at this P wave. Look at this years before the next part of the heart. So we have atrial contraction and then a year and a half before the ventricles decide to do their thing. We got a P wave with nobody. We got a P wave because what's happening is something is blocking from the SA to the AV. And if there's no electricity in the AV, there's no electricity going to the ventricles don't contract. So this is very, very serious. Very, very serious. And those are some of the things that you as technicians are going to assist in reading and interpreting. Comments, questions, concerns about ECG. I always love it when I get to do like actual medical stuff with you guys, because it just reminds me how far you've come in a very, very short period of time. So any questions about the electricity, the ECG? Fantastic. All right, so we have just a few minutes left. Did you guys go into fetal circulation? No, that's okay. So here's the deal about a fetus. Let's talk about fetuses. Is it fetuses or feti? What is the plural? We'll say fetuses. Is the fetus breathing? Like you're breathing?
No.
Of course not. Technically, no. The lungs are completely collapsed. So here's what's happening in a fetus. The fetus is using energy to grow and develop. And the stuff that it doesn't need right now, it's not going to waste energy on to make it work. It can save that energy and make it grow. Baby is in mommy's tummy. I don't need to put the energy into inflating the lungs, do I? Because I'm not breathing by myself. I'm not having to oxygenate myself. So the lungs remain collapsed so that the energy that is being used in me right now to inflate and deflate my lungs, baby's not having to use that energy. That energy goes into developing the lungs. Things like their liver doesn't need to work. Their kidneys don't really need to do the same thing that it would normally do. So any organs that don't have to work to survive, we're not really using them. We're just letting them grow up and develop. What that does is it causes a difference in their heart anatomy. And time flies when we are having fun. We're going to pick it up here at the fetal heart on tomorrow. And we're going to talk about a condition, you may have heard of it, called hole in the heart. Yeah? And that is a residual where something that is normal in the fetus that should be resolved in the baby that is born doesn't get resolved. And then we call that condition hole in the heart. So you guys take 10. We'll start back here at 11:30 and finish talking about proteins and amino acids.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
this is Alicia.